Wonderful. Well, it is a delight to be here. I'm Brady Piñero Walkinshaw. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental Media Organization in the United States called Grist. And Grist focuses on telling stories about climate, justice, and solutions, and thinking about how we can mobilize millions of Americans to think about tackling and solving the climate crisis. So it's been wonderful to be a partner for several years now to the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital. And a delight of getting to be part of that is talking with extraordinary filmmakers and individuals like Anabel Rodríguez Ríos, who we'll get into conversation with here in a moment. I am zooming in from my home in Seattle, Washington. Anabel is in Vienna, Austria, so we are at across bodies of water, times of day, but united by enthusiasm for this conversation we're about to have about this small town in Venezuela and what it means for environmentalism and communities undergoing extraordinary political and environmental change. So I thought that I would just start by asking Anabel, I would just maybe introduce yourself. And as you're introducing yourself, I would love to hear maybe how you came to know Congo Mirador, the town that is, or the village on the water that is featured in your film.
Yeah, well, yes, I'm a Venezuelan filmmaker. Once Upon a Time in Venezuela is my first feature, actually. And we spent 5 years following the destiny of this village called Congo Mirador. In Spanish, these type of villages, or at least in Venezuela, we call them pueblos de agua. They are like these palafite villages built on top of the waters of Maracaibo Lake. And Maracaibo Lake is a place from which Venezuela had taken its oil from since the times of the Second World War, when the boom of oil and all this, the system came really hungry for oil and so on. So then Venezuela did this deep shift into their way of life, of living. And Maracaibo Lake was the epicentrum from that. And I came first years ago because, as many Venezuelan artists, we've been asking ourselves, well, how had determined us as a culture the fact that we have been extractors and providers of oil, and our whole economy had been basically practically centered, focused into that. And this has had in the culture itself like deep effects. So the most obvious is to go to where the things are happening, which is Maracaibo Lake. And there, the first thing that is striking is to see the contrast between the fact that you have there the industry, these enormous structures of extraction, and half hour away of navigation, you have these communities that are really totally neglected. Yeah. And at the same time, they are suffering in the first hand the pollution of it. So then Maracaibo, the lake itself is highly polluted. Unfortunately, there is not much studies about it. And then at the same time, there is this cultural and spiritual ground on these communities that is highly interesting, and it sums up to the whole contrast of it. And part of it is there is this phenomenon there, atmospheric phenomenon called relámpago del Catatumbo lightning, which is a lightning that has no thunder. And it's this unique phenomenon that happens there. And what it is that during the nights there, under the open sky, the whole stars and so on, and then you have this spectacular thing going on in the sky. That's as it has no sound. Is this luminescence in the middle of the darkness that is not only symbolic but really it really makes you, even if you're not a person that is not a mystic person, it brings you to that because it's just this piece of beyond. So we wanted to shoot that. That was our first task, to shoot that and to begin to work with the communities and see how was their culture and so on. and capture this magic.
You
And that's
captured
how it began. That's how it began.
symbolism, and the symbolism in the film is really beautiful and powerful. And I thought the first question I would ask you is just to kind of root it in the environmentalism and the kind of environmental nature in the film, where you talk about extraction and you talk a lot about the sedimentation and the impacts this communities. It's quite literally almost sinking right into the water. And I thought maybe just to start, share how you see the environmental aspects of this film. I mean, why do you see it as a film about, or do you see it as a film about kind of environmentalism?
Well, the environmental, it really, from the first concept we had was that it was most of a poetic concept, I would say, because this place, I mean, the lagoon itself is within the whole delta of an enormous river, which is called Catatumbo River. And over the last 17 years or so, this phenomenon has accelerated, yeah, and we know it because together with the geologists, they did an analysis on how it happened with these satellite pictures, no? So then it has really accelerated. So the first theory is that this has happened because of the climate change, and within the deltas this is very obvious, isn't it? In the deltas it becomes really obvious this phenomenon. And uh, the same as in the environment, within the social and political living of people, that was a community that was reflecting us as a whole society, as a whole country, was more or less happening the same. And this is from a poetic point of view, yes. So then it's like this free thinking, but in a way, in a spiritual way. I think we're not very far from how things are, because the same as this village was turning into a swamp, the whole relationships between people, the interrelationships between people was getting more and more corrupted and polluted, and and the same was happening within the environment. So I guess, yeah, it's all a whole thing was a different aspects of a same phenomenon, but the same, and I repeat, it's really from a poetic point of view.
And there is
So
mystic, almost this, as you say, almost this kind of mystic sensibility to how you, I think, kind of share the story and film the. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, I'm excited for folks to see it. I mean, it's just visually so beautiful. And I want to get to the politics, because Hugo Chavez certainly looms large. A lot has happened in Venezuela since you finished filming. I want to get to that, but the one question I wanted to ask is, you really do center the film on these two very powerful women protagonists, and there I should also just say there's lots of children in the film, which are amazing. I love the role that the kids play in the film, particularly the girls. And I was curious if you might talk a little bit about your relationship with these two women, and if those continued after the filming, if how you got to know them.
yeah, well, everything began first with the kids, I got to say. Remember, we were there for 5 years, and in the first year, everything began. The concept was to tell the whole story of the community from the perspective of the kids, and to tell kind of a growing up story. And part of these kids, they all moved because of the same situation. And then we were left with the first question of, okay, what is the film about? It's about these kids moving, and then we go with them and tell this story of displacement and so on, and the lake, or is about the village. So and we stayed in the village, and the first link that was the natural link was the teacher, who was actually our first host. And yeah, as well, there was a necessity of telling more of the grown-ups story. So back then we had this ambition of making really an epic multi-character story, almost like a series. So we really got extensive about getting into following their stories and so on. And then we kept following the story of the girl as part of this first impulse of following the kids, and then began shooting with filming with the teacher and her story. And then the story of this very old man, the oldest man of the village, this almost again have a spiritual root, and it took us a couple of years to get into who is the, I don't know if the people have seen the film right now or not, but who is the antagonist of this teacher, who is the local political leader, and who actually is the one that has the possibilities for the little jobs that are there, or the food and so on, as she is the one that belongs to the party. And within the scheme of power in Venezuela, uh, the access to the resources is directly linked with how you are configured within the government party. So then it began to be this story about the relationship of them both, in the sense on how the power works. And at the same time, there is this, I mean, we call it environment, but it's like this overall situation that is the one that is really determining all the community, and they are really unable to deal with that, even though it's a common problem. So then that's when it began to be even more of a mirror. It was more of a reflection of us as a society, because this what happened there in this story, what happens in that story, is what has happened to us Venezuelans in one or less intensity. And I would link it even with environment, because the whole country, as many countries in Latin America, have been within this concert of the world. It is a place that is uh, taken as a mine, is an enormous mine, not only of oil, but now of gold and so on. And in there lies a big tragedy for people. So yeah, this is pretty much
I mean, it's almost this kind of cyclical story of extraction, right, that you're talking about, and it's different forms of extraction that repeat themselves. And I mean, you had, when you were filming, I mean, Hugo, for Hugo Chavez passed, and I think it was 2013, right? So Hugo Chavez passed away in 2013, and then Nicolas Maduro, came into power, who was, his anointed successor. And so you were filming during this period, and then it seems like when you stopped filming and when you completed the documentary, all of the political events of the past year hadn't unfolded yet in Venezuela, right? Or had you already finished the filming when the last year's political events unfolded?
What do you, well, which of the events? Because we're full of events.
I mean, right, there are many. I mean, how does, maybe just share, I mean, how has this community then, like, if you take us to current day over the past year, I mean, how has the relation, I was left asking, how does the relationship of this powerful woman in the community, who is very connected to the Maduro and the Chavez governments, like how is she today? I was very curious.
Yeah, well, I don't know if people have not seen the film. This is gonna be the spoiler of all. They are all these in the story. They are all displaced. Brady. They are living in different cities, in inland kind of thing, or in Colombia. Tamara, for instance, she's probably the one that has it less tough, but she has it tough as well. Still, she's a survivor, yeah, and a person of business, and whatever she is, somehow she makes it. Still, there is a structural situation in Venezuela right now that is tough for everyone. Like, for instance, oil, so the whole economy is being liberated into this dollarized economy. So, and people are getting things with cash dollars mainly, or transfers from American bank to American bank accounts, or the ones that have no access to that, they are left into the a whole neglectancy, and people are dying and so on. So then within that frame, oil is it could get as high as $3 per liter. So you can imagine how things can be for people within that situation. The teacher, she is as well living in a city within the how do you call that? Like it's a tierra firme, like um, firm land, and not anymore in the village. And she hires a room and is struggling, with being a single mother. Other people have lived it even more tough. For instance, part of the kids I began to shoot with, I mean, some of them have died of tuberculosis because there is this the tuberculosis is beginning to happen even with more intensity these days, which was an illness that was eliminated for decades. Now it's coming back. And the little girl, Joaini, the one that is in the carnival as the queen, beauty queen, and so on, yeah, she fell a bit into the destiny as many of the girls there. She got together with this guy who is a fisherman, and she's 17 years old, still cannot read or write, and is totally dependent on him. And her grandmother died of a diabetes that could not be assisted, so, and she was left on her own practically. So yeah, what to say? They are all destinies that are a bit, well, tragic. Some of them, isn't it? And that's the situation these days.
Yeah, I mean, maybe going back to the art of the film, I thought that the cinematography was just beautiful. I mean, and the images of the town on the water. Were there challenges in filming? I mean, maybe just talk a little bit about what the challenges were that you ran into in the filming itself.
Well, many, how to say, I mean, to shoot in Congo Mirador is like to shoot in the Amazon. That means that you really need to become like independent as a group, with your energy, with your son. We had generators. We had to solve our oil, and with all the difficulties that means, we had to get all our water, like drinkable water, these kind of things. Yeah. But really the most serious situation is that, as well as the whole country, because of this whole state of things, it is it's very common that the territories are taken by groups or armed groups. So then they take the control on several places, and Congo Mirador was taken by an armed group within the time that we were shooting there. So then that was really the most serious and difficult thing to deal with. And part of the difficulty is, of course, that these people are just well, they kill, yeah, or kidnap, or but on the other hand, there was a difficulty that is less serious, but still a difficulty, which is how to ignore such a symptom of this place, and not to film it, and to include it within the story, to really make understand what means when a society gets totally vulnerable. Yeah. And the local mini powers take control. So yeah, this was the main thing. Still, I would say, as everything, no, things are not black or white. I mean, with these guys, we were living together in Tamara's house. Actually, this was how it was. And when you see them, they were kids, not older than 22 years old. You know what I mean? And at the end, we were, they even wanted to make some videos, because they had some lyrics that they wanted to shoot as a video, hip hop or rap or whatever. So, life is just like this. It's like in this in between. And the place, yes, it is polluted, but still one can get into these alleyways, into these lagoons that are amazing. And then when we really wanted to, not to have a shower, but just to wash ourselves, we would go into these lagoons, and and be happy within in the middle of this amazing nature. So I think I was tremendously happy there, even though so many, limitations.
I think that's a really wonderful note to close on. I am extremely grateful for this conversation, and I hope that many people see the film. And I think it's just it was very powerful. So I don't know if you have any closing comments, Anabel, but if not, I just want to give gratitude to the Film Festival in the nation's capital, the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital, for their great work in elevating filmmakers like you and this great film. And I hope that you're all able to tune in virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this conversation, and thank you to the Environmental Film Festival. It's a super honor to be here. I wish I was there, but still, it's beautiful to see the amazing films that are there, and it's an honor for us. And we are quite open to continue conversation. Please visit us in our website, onceuponatimeinvenezuela.com, and we are there at your service to talk.
Well, thank you. Have a great evening in Vienna.
You too. Thank you.